Hey, welcome to My Mama Summer. My name is Aimee Devlin. I'm an unconventional millennial mother living abroad, building a business and raising children while stepping into who she's meant to be. This podcast is an audio version of my newsletter, which you can find at mymamasummer.com. The episodes are short, wholehearted reflections of my life as a mother, business owner, and everyday human committed to being the best she can be. Pop in your headphones, grab a cuppa and a cookie, and take this time to just be with me. My whole life, I've grown up with a healthy distrust of authority, particularly in the medical system. When I was 8 years old, my dad was reading books regularly from the library, and I picked up one of his books called The Cancer Cure That Worked. It's a book by a guy called Barry Lyons, and that book is all about the work of a man called Royal Raymond Rife. He was born in the late 1800s and did some incredible work around frequencies and cancer. And I read this book when I was 8 years old alongside some other books that my dad was reading at the time. I devoured these books. The other one that had a big impact on my life, which I've since shifted my ideology on, was one called Why You Don't Need Meat. So at the age of 8, I became a vegetarian, and I also knew that the medical system was not to be trusted. And so I maintained that lens growing up, and I'm very grateful for those early sparks that allowed me to do that. One of the areas that I've always been interested in is birth. It always felt wrong for me that birth existed in a hospital and it looked clinical and sanitized. And so birth was an area that I dove into when I wanted to learn about alternative or complementary medicine. And it's something that I continue to research. It's very important to me, as it should be for any woman who wants to birth a child or any man connected to a woman who wants to birth a child, because birth is our first experience of the world. And when it's medicalised and ritualised, as it is so often in today's world, I believe that is so damaging, not only for the mother, but also for the children that come into the world in this way through a cascade of interventions by people who believe they're doing the right thing on some level, but probably know on another that it doesn't feel right. And these are things like inductions and IV fluids, putting gowns on, shaving, enemas, this routine monitoring through straps that prevent us from being able to move around, interventions like rupturing membranes and internal exams and directing women how to push. This all goes against the natural feeling that comes from within a woman. Every woman knows how to give birth. It's not something we need to be taught, but we've been hoodwinked into believing that. We don't trust ourselves the way that we should. And once again, this is all because of programming and the Rockefeller medicine system. And so thankfully in today's world, we have a dramatic increase in the amount of women who are looking to have a natural birth, to say no to interventions, have a free birth or a home birth, or at least a birth in a birthing center. Many women hire doulas or midwives to support and advocate for them when they birth. And what's interesting, as Yolanda Norris Clark points out in her books, is the very reality of believing that we need advocacy during birth is itself a glaring red flag. And it signifies an underlying awareness that we aren't safe. We're told to put together birth plans. And yet most people in communities of women who have experienced birth, particularly in the medical system, talk about how their birth plan wasn't followed. And yes, how do you even plan a birth? When I birthed my daughter, it took 5 days, and I didn't plan for it to take that long. And even though I had a lot of information, it wasn't information necessarily that I needed. I needed support. I needed to be trusted. I needed to be gently pushed back to my inner compass and to understand that I had the power and I wasn't doing anything wrong. And for me personally, in my first birth, I planned a home birth. 5 days later, I birthed in the hospital. And I believe what was missing in that time period was love, support, and care from women. I didn't have a doula. I thought a midwife would be all the support that I needed, but I needed more. Women need women in birth. And that's why there is such a movement towards free birth and home birth, because that's how birth should happen. It's considered normal to be given opiates, narcotics for pain relief during birth, all the natural things that happen while we're birthing a baby. Maybe we feel nauseous or we vomit. These are normal things. Yet the medical system tells us that they can take them away. We can help you. We can save you. We'll, quote, deliver your baby. We'll give you an ultrasound. We'll put a fetal monitor on you. All of these interventions are designed to place us as the mother into a powerless situation and to place the doctor as the god. Think about how birth is pictured and portrayed in the media, in movies. Every time I see a birth on the TV or in a movie, it makes me scream. The woman's rushed to the hospital to be saved. The doctor puts her in a wheelchair, lays her on her back, lifts up her legs, and 2 seconds later a baby is delivered, quote, by the doctor. And none of that is reality. We're taught we're doing it wrong. Maybe our body is built in the wrong way, so they have to save us. And yet we know that birth happens in an environment where the mother needs to be relaxed. This is what produces oxytocin and all the other hormones and prostaglandins and everything that allows the mother to do what she needs to do. She needs calm. She needs darkness. She needs privacy. She needs to feel safe. What she needs is the antithesis of a hospital room. It is so strange to me that home birth, free birth isn't the norm, that cutting a cord before the blood's even in the child, that jabbing a woman in the leg with oxytocin is considered normal so that she can birth her placenta, that we're, quote, only given 2 hours to push our baby out, and if it takes longer than that, that it's, quote, prolonged, that mothers who are 35 years or older when delivering are considered geriatric, and that's just accepted. So over the years, I've heard many different birth stories from many women that I know and don't know, some more positive than others. And I wrote a story in 2017 called The Machine of Birth. And the inspiration for it was my study into what birth is, what birth isn't, and the difference between medicalised, ritualised birth and natural birth. And I was also writing this story from the viewpoint of the effect on the child, on the baby who's coming into this world for the first time through the lens of their birth. And there's a lot of different research that's been done on the difference between naturally birthed children and caesarean births and the effect on the child. So I wrote this story from a viewpoint of the medicalisation of birth, from the lens of seeing the woman as a machine who has to do everything by a particular time frame, in a particular way, so as to not deviate from the plan, because doctors might need to play golf tomorrow, or the nurse's shift might be ending in 5 minutes. Or even in the case of a midwife, as in the case of my birth, another woman may be birthing at the same time, and she may need to go and support her and choose to transfer you. I also chose to use the term droids to describe the doctors and the nurses in the medical system that was involved in this imaginary birth that I describe in my story. And the reason for that is because I believe that not everyone who's in this system is conscious of what they're doing. They don't know what they don't know. They just know they have a plan. They know what they do know. They know the training that they've undergone, and they don't have the full picture. They're not looking at the energetic, the spiritual, the physical, the emotional aspects of what it means to birth or be birthed. They're just ticking boxes. So this is quite a sobering story based on everything I learned about birth and the way that we do birth in the modern world. If you're someone who's pregnant or planning to have children soon, I wouldn't necessarily recommend listening to this story, but I felt like it was important to share and to put this out into the world because this is the norm. This is how most people birth. And yes, I've written it from a very extreme perspective, but I've done that with intention because as I mentioned earlier, this needs to change. Interventions are not normal. A woman feeling she's inadequate is not normal. A woman feeling like she needs to be saved is not normal. I celebrate every time I hear a woman who is free birthing, who has brought a new child into the world without the need for the medical system. Because every time a woman does that, she shows other women what's possible, that they too are capable of the same thing. And I love this resurgence we're seeing of the amount of doulas and birth keepers and midwives who are helping women to find their power and to birth as they were supposed to birth. So now I'm going to share my story called The Machine of Birth. I would say enjoy it, but I don't think you will enjoy it from the perspective of what it may bring up inside of you. And at the same time, I'm going to ask you to listen anyway. Not if you're pregnant. Just turn this off if you're pregnant. It's not something you need in your psyche. Instead, go watch a home birth or a free birth of a beautiful baby coming into this world. My desire in sharing this is simply to have more people, men and women, understand that birth is normal, it's natural, it's celebrated, it's messy, it is the most beautiful thing you'll ever experience. And yet most women don't experience it that way. And that's what I'm a stand for. I stand against the ritualization and the medicalization of birth. And if you're listening to this, it's highly likely that you do too. The machine of birth. The machine has arrived. The droids are busily moving into position. They know what to look for. Their prolonged education has prepared them for this very day. Their eagle eyes are myopic, trained to seek out all that is wrong. They are in control now. Everything will be fine, so long as it doesn't deviate from the plan, their carefully laid out plan. In line with requirements, the machine has been brought in, declothed, sanitized, shaven, has signed away autonomy. Her desires matter no more. Her umbilicus now tied to the hospital that dominates her. All evidence of her individuality cleansed, washed away by the educated ones. The droids believe it's all for the best, not realizing their minds are no longer theirs, for they are bound by and tethered to the technocrats they kneel at the feet of. The machine entered the hospital with a partner, though he is unseen by the droids. His operating system is different, based on empathy and love, a language they have not yet learned. Emotion was squeezed out of them in training, considered an unmeasurable burden that brings too much baggage. He's silenced and put in his place. We can't have him messing with the outcome. Every stage of the ritual must be manipulated, managed, and timed perfectly. Interventions must be only made by the droids at careful intervals, for their eyes are on the prize. The process follows a clear structure and timeline, and the droids all have a place on the assembly line. There can be no deviation from the plan. It's the prize, the product that matters most. The machine is a means to the end, an inconvenient obstacle that talks and groans and speaks irrationally throughout the process. The droids are trained to minimize this unnecessary, maddening hysteria. If the machine attempts to access transcendental realms, she is swiftly crushed. There is no place for otherworldliness in this stark, sterile room. There will be no spiritual learnings from this birth. The droids come prepared with drugs, machinery, and implements to show the machine her true place in the hierarchy. The machine is not there to make decisions, nor experience. She is there for the mechanized ritual extraction that brings forth fresh new blood from which other droids can benefit too. Since her arrival, the machine has been prodded and poked, tested and touched. They open her and place hands inside her temple without her consent. There can be no deviation from the plan. They watch the clock and work around her, not with her. All that is in sight is the finish line. All that matters is the arrival of the product. The journey there is inconsequential, but something's not right. She is defective. She does not open the way she must. The product is not arriving in the specified time frame. Perhaps it's the light that shines so bright, forcing glare into her eyes and making her already weary body tire more. Maybe it's the discordance of the monitor, interrupting her already fragile consciousness every time it changes pace, or the tick-tock, tick of the clock. It could be the droids continually coming and going to poke her and prod her, to ask her questions she's already answered, and drop hints she's not quite doing it right. Perhaps it's because she's naked and vulnerable, with men governing her as she lays bare on her back. It might be because she's thirsty and hungry for food, but the droids deny her sustenance until the prize is delivered. Maybe it would be helpful if she were able to move freely, to use the body given to her for this very purpose, to rise and fall with the surges of power, to walk around the room. The starkness of the room affects her ability to relax, to surrender, to open her petals like the blooming flower she is. The unyielding noise and ignorant droids prevent her from going within where she needs to go. Whatever the reason, the machine knows, through both veiled implication and outright condemnation, she simply isn't good enough. She can't provide the product in time. The droids have a schedule and she must adhere to the time frame. There can be no deviation from the plan. The droids take charge. She's unsure. She tries to speak, but she has no say. She matters not. More tests, lots of chatter. She doesn't really know what she's agreeing to. They don't need her permission, penetrating her, again, tapping into her vein. What little life force she has left soon begins to dissipate. The droids exhale as they pacify her. It is they who know best. The product will be delivered in time. There can be no deviation from the plan. The symbolic saviors, the lifeline, the drugs are injected into the bloodstream of the machine, at which point the surges thunderously intensify, from rhythmic and bearable to excruciating in an instant. She bites, thrashes, and squeezes. What she could once handle is a distant memory. The steady, slowly increasing surges of energy within her womb space, once bearable, now too fast, too shocking. As they flowed through her body with regularity and power, she was able to ride the wave. She now feels like she'll split open and bleed to death on the bed. Her body writhes in pain, the surges too close and overwhelming, her natural pain relief unable to keep up or to quell what has happened so quickly. The machine starts to spiral. She just can't take the intensity. The droids cannot wait for her. Their deadline is fast approaching. The machine has already taken enough of their precious time. She is failing. She cannot keep up with the program. She is inadequate, incompetent. They must intervene. Again. The machine cries desperately for relief. She cannot do it on her own, just as they'd expected. They've been waiting for this very moment. She was never strong enough to do this on her own. Only the droids can save her now. They swiftly organize the procedure that will bring much-needed peace to the room. Another droid arrives to help with the pain. He jabs her in the spine with his vicious long tool and promises to make it all better. He'll readily remove the source of the pain, which had appeared so suddenly, upon receipt of the drugs, as long as she stops the commotion. He'll bring her back down to earth, where she belongs, to take life from her body to give life to the product. Focus upon the prize has now intensified, incessant beeping louder and harsher, all eyes on the monitor. Once necessary to some extent, she's now just a passive machine, vanquished by the militarized process around her. The sounds, so shrill, take over. She leans back, exhausted, wanting to sleep, to give up. The drugs set in. They are meant to save her, but the feelings shift from pain to powerless. What little she had, now crushed. She is just a byproduct. All she wants to do is rest. Her hopes are dashed, her spirit torn. She wonders if it's meant to be like this. Why are the droids so harsh? Why has she been reduced to a hysterical vessel which houses a prize more valuable than she? Her lover is lost too. His deep desire to hold and protect her is at odds with his belief the droids know what's best for her. It doesn't seem as if they do, but they assure him they have it all under control. What is he to do? There are more of them than he. He's outnumbered, untrained, unprepared. His love forever in her keep. Each time the droids touch her, he rages inside. She is hurting, and his hands are tied. He wants to envelop her and smoothly guide her through the gateway she is so adequately designed to cross, to share in the magic with her on the other side. But his dreams are rudely shattered when the beeping starts to quicken. The product is under duress. Perhaps he picks up on his mother's fears as a cycle of intervention reinforces her paralysis and lack of faith in what her body is designed for. Perhaps he picks up on his father's fears and intense desire to help his lover navigate this journey. Maybe it's confusion as the natural and synthetic hormones cascade, too much oxytocin coursing through their veins. It could be all the noise and commotion, the frenetic pace of the room, or the sudden fogginess and dizziness he feels, the disconnection from his once bonded mother, the path once lit, now dark and unknown. He too begins to spiral out of control, his heart racing, his future now uncertain, his safe existence within a serene and restful world no longer. Would he ever enter the magical world in his dream? A world as soothing and loving and nurturing as where he'd come from? A place he'd transition to slowly, with care, where he'd learn to breathe in a different way and expand upon the already beautiful bond he'd forged with his mother, the machine. But now his hopes are dashed. There can be no deviation from the plan. He'd been violently torn from his mother. It was stark and cold and mechanized, just the way the droids liked it to be. Predictable. He doesn't remember much except panic and pain. He tried so hard to make it, against all the odds. He was on the home stretch and could see the finish line. He could no longer feel the connection to his mother. Something was wrong. He too wasn't good enough for the robots. It all became cold and loud, and with a rush came a fierce pull at his feet. He wasn't expecting it to be like this. After being removed from his warm home, it all happened so fast. It was so intensely bright. He was rubbed and weighed, then blinded and jabbed in his leg. He gagged on metal as he was suctioned and forced to learn to breathe. His first breath was a cry. He cried for his home and all he'd ever known. He so desperately yearned to return to the place that would soothe him as he tossed and turned, of nourishment and softness. But there was none of that here. Instead, he met the droids, so gleefully in control. A place where his mother was treated like no being should be. A new mother who so bravely entered the portal, not knowing what she would find. All she found was what never should be. This moment in time so bittersweet. A remarkable gift had arrived, and yet this brave mother could not understand the sadness when she wandered in her dreams. She and her son could both not help but feel incapable. The question unanswered. Is this how it's meant to be? At last and at least her son had arrived, the most beautiful boy she'd ever seen. In her drugged stupor, she could not feel fully the magnitude of the events that had unfolded, and so she said to the droids, much like a machine, "Thank you for saving my baby." If you enjoyed this episode and like reading as much as you do listening, I would love to welcome you as another subscriber to my newsletter. Head on over to mymamasummer.com to subscribe and let me know what you loved most about this episode. I love hearing your feedback. It's my favorite part of sharing what's on my heart. I'll see you over there. Have a beautiful day.